G'day, Rena.
Hi, how are you? Welcome to Melbourne through the phone.
Thank you.
Mr. Assange, I welcome you to Melbourne through the phone. We are very pleased to have you, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And I would like you to tell us, what does the entrance of Wikileaks Party in the Senate means for the Australian people and the country? And I would like to put some notes here, so I won't interrupt you, to tell us all about, for instance, transparency, justice, environment, economy, refugees, education system, and health system.
Okay, I'll try. Well, first of all, the entrance of the Wikileaks Party into the Australian election and my running for the Victorian Senate, you should be sure to vote one for Wikileaks Party in the Victorian Senate above the line. You can vote however you like in the House of Reps, but for the Senate Wikileaks Party. Well, it's a reflection of something very interesting that's happening in Australia. The Australian electoral support for WikiLeaks as a party and for me is currently running between 20 to 26%, depending on whether it's the party or me. And that's not the same as what will happen on the voting. On the polling day, we're going to have a hard struggle. But it's what people are saying to Ray Morgan Research and these other pollsters. And that's borne out for a year and a half of statistical surveys by the Australian population, that the Australian population really believes in what we do. It also defends the rights of an Australian organisation, WikiLeaks, cannot be attacked by the US and the UK, and defends the rights of Australians to be supported by their government. And that phenomenon within Australia, a political flowering, a political awakening, I think can also be seen in the unprecedented number of minor parties running in this election. The Wikileaks Party is the most popular of these new parties, but the number has doubled since the last election, even though the government has tried to increase the fees to run for senator and so on. We haven't seen that kind of doubling of support for minor parties since the Great Depression in Australia. Now, clearly it's not related simply to the economy. It's something else. There's a disaffection with the behaviour of the two major parties, and arguably the Greens and their role in Canberra. And where is that coming from? Well, it's not that the parties have changed. It's not that the ALP has suddenly gone bad, or that the coalition has suddenly gone bad. They've been bad for a long, long time. We all know that as soon as they get into Canberra, they stop representing Australian interests and they start representing the interests of some other group. So that's been happening for a while. What is new is that the Australian population is starting to see it and is starting to recognise it. And that's something that I think is coming about as a result of a breakthrough in the Australian media, where organisations like Wikileaks can communicate directly to the Australian population. But there's also news sites like Crikey that started after Matilda, new forums where people are discussing their issues, people sending things over email, Twitter and so on. So this great political awakening in Australia appears to be coming about as a result of people understanding what is really going on. And part of that understanding came about from seeing how the Australian government behaved towards WikiLeaks as an Australian publisher and me personally. It's a situation I know a lot about because I lived through it. But to see a government that is meant to defend Australians say publicly that it was starting a whole of government investigation involving the Domestic Intelligence Agency, the Foreign Intelligence Agency, the Department of Defence, the Australian Federal Police, the Attorney General's Department, who was going to try and prosecute me, looking to prosecuting me for being a traitor, to look into cancelling my passport, etc. All to impress the Americans, because the Australian Federal Police investigation completely cleared me and Wikileaks of breaking any Australian law. That shows that the will of the Australian people has not been represented. The will of the Australian people was that we wanted to hear more about what Australia's relationships were like with the US. What were the dirty deals being done? And even the Australian media were overwhelmingly supportive. But the Australian government acted against interest. Similarly, we saw in the Iraq War, we had overwhelming view in Australia that Australian troops are important and they should not be squandered on crazy Middle East adventurism being pushed by the United States. And the will of the Australian people was overridden. And of course, in hindsight, now we can see the Australian population was right. And the flood of refugees now coming out of Iraq is partly a result of the Australian government's backing for that disastrous war. Now, if we look more broadly, what do Australians want for senators? Well, the Senate was meant to be a house of review. The Senate is meant to hold government to account, to scrutinise its conduct and to check the legislation and deals that it was making. Instead of being a house of review, the Senate has become a house of deal-making. The same parties that are in the House of Representatives that form government are in the Senate. And so they can't have meaningful oversight of each other. We want to change the Senate back into being an organisation that scrutinises and holds government to account. And how are we going to do that? Well, in the way that we have been doing that when we hold banks to account. And we've had massive legal cases. Wikileaks, the publisher, has massive legal cases in relation to banks, the same way we've been doing it. We've exposed extrajudicial assassinations and war crimes and so on. It's about being fearless in understanding and scrutinising a complex phenomena, telling the public about where it is, looking at the networks and associations. And that's what the Australian people need. Any party can promise various policies as they go into the election. But, times change during the course of the government. We know that most promises are not upheld. So what is most important is the ongoing scrutiny of the behaviour of the Australian government. Now, in individual policies, we look at it through the lens of the principle that a few simple principles should guide policy making. Otherwise, it's simply about doing favours for lobbying. The simple principles we have are to push for transparency and accountability and justice. And we know that, in fact, good transparency and accountability give you justice. And where unjust plans have been made, or unjust proposals have been made, if they come out to the Australian population, Australian media soon enough, the Australian population can oppose them. You can see that it's hurting their interests. We are not a party of the left or the right. We are a party that, insofar as it pursues justice, has a lot of overlap with what people on the left are striving for. Insofar as we're a party that wants to hold government to account, understands the abuses of government and bureaucracy and red tape. We have a lot of overlap with parties that are on the right. We are not a party that's been around for a long time, so we don't have these problems with cronyism, people giving jobs to their mates, and so on. So I'm the lead candidate in Victoria, and I have the two running mates, very well-educated people, Leslie Carnold and Binoy Kampmak, also in Victoria, but we also have people running in the other states in Australia. All of them have a long history of fighting for justice, highly educated and accomplished, including New South Wales, former Australian diplomat, Alison Gronowski.
Yes. May I ask you, what is your opinion about what is happening now in Greece?
Our partner publication in Greece is Tania. We've worked with them for a number of years. So we're across some of what was happening in Greece. I'm not up to date as of the last few months, but the situation in Greece, and I have the Greek friends who have come over to tell me about it over the past year and a half, is, I think, an example of what happens when you have people engaged in corrupt secret deals for their mates, and at both ends, within Greece and within the EU. So within the EU, we have people engaged in high finance within the EU who are connected to the major banks and Goldman Sachs and so on, getting cuts from making loans to Greece. And then within Greece, we have people who are pushing to receive those loans, and not to give them to the general economy of Greece, but in fact, so they could take them and preferentially distribute them to different sectors of the Greek economy, or different sectors of government that they preferred. And as a result of this, and the nature of the euro, you have a situation where Greece is now pushed into a very difficult position, and there's not the proper economic and political mechanisms necessary to easily allow Greece to either change its currency or to engage in another type of economic relationship to manage its own destiny.
Yep. May I ask you about the southern Mediterranean region? You know that it's on fire as well. We have wars, uprising, and on the other hand, oils and hydrocarbons.
Yeah, well, there's two great wars going on at the moment, right? Two great games. And one great game is the war for oil and oil resources. And it's not that states alone pursue this. We look at, say, the U.S. policy in the Middle East. It's people connected to oil companies who think they'll make big contracts. Companies like Halliburton, who are close to the Bush administration, and similar organizations close to the Obama administration. They all push to profiteer off war and its spoils. And then the other great game that is going on, and in fact particularly in the Mediterranean region, is the great war for information. So this is finding where the fiber optic cable links go. Just like there's war over oil pipelines, there's a battle for control of fiber optic cables. Because those fiber optic cables connect whole continents together. Every email, every telephone call, every SMS, every bank transaction goes over those fiber optic cables. And organizations, big spy agencies like GCHQ in the UK and the National Security Agency in the US are involved in this game of sucking out an entire continent or an entire region telecommunications, which reveals the whole community structure of a nation. It's all its interests and nearly all its interests in nearly every economic trade that it engages in, nearly every relationship, and pushing that to the United States, where it's stored forever in the bowels of the National Security Agency, and that's then made accessible to the National Security Agency, and of course it's coupled organizations, its cronies, And they have, as a result, information that they can use to blackmail and bribe everyone. That's the sort of thing that is done in order to win economic preferment and to assist the connected organisations. It's a problem also for Australia, because Australia's traffic, we all use Gmail and Microsoft and Apple and Yahoo, and these companies have been proven to be giving access directly to national security agencies in the United States, and the Australian government's not taking responsibility for that. What is the threat to Australian democracy and to Australian businesses if the United States government and its corporate cronies have access to all that information? How is that going to be used against Australians in the future?
Yep. Can I ask you a personal question? How is life in the ambassador of Ecuador? Are there times when you would prefer to live an ordinary life or to come back here?
I don't. Yeah. Well, every day that you fight for your principles is a day well lived. I have a lot of people in the organisation that I have to be responsible for. As Wikileaks, the publisher, and now have to be responsible for this election in Australia. There are people in precarious positions, so we are busy fighting for them. As to whether some days I would prefer to live an ordinary life, yeah, for some moments, but then I'm drawn back into the battle that we're engaged in, and before I was in this, I've been 400-something days in the embassy now. I was 590 days on house arrest before that, and 10 days in solitary confinement before that. Going back to when I had freedom of movement, so I would take some days off now and then. But, I've become bored with that too. It's not nice to relax, but after a few days, relaxing is not relaxing.
Mr. Assange, thank you very much for this, for your time, for all these answers that you gave us. We wish you luck, and we will be very happy to see you here in Australia.
You're most welcome.